The Paddy Power Half Hour on OTB Sports. Minimal contact in stadiums. That shouldn't stop the usual suspects from going down. Gamble responsibly. Gamblingcare.ie.
Now you're very welcome along to the Paddy Power Half Hour here in Off the Ball. Every Friday at 1:30 we tell you what to watch and why, and hopefully navigate the betting markets as well. Joining us on the line this week is Paddy Power's odds compiler Emmet O'Keeffe. Emmet, how are you getting on?
Not too bad, Enda. Looking forward to one of the best sporting weekends of the year, probably.
Yeah, it's an absolutely massive weekend. And OTB's resident boxing nut and football cliches fan Ronan Mullen is on the other line. Ronan, how are you doing?
All's well, Enda. How are things?
What's your favourite football cliche these days?
Ooh, it's going to take something to beat. He hit it and it stayed hit. That still has to be my favourite. But like, there's any amount of them coming. Honours even. Have honours ever been uneven? And do you know what I mean? When they're split at the end of a game. So like, Adam Hurrey has made a living out of it. I just wish I had the foresight to do something similar.
My favourite one is that he's due a goal, because it absolutely makes no sense at all. Right, before we get into the games, I want to tell you about the near miss that we've been running over the last couple of weeks. It's our new segment, Near Miss, and it's called that because if you nearly win a Premier League bet, then you can send it in, screenshot it and send us the screenshot of your bet that lost out by one or two different little things. If it was a niggly goal or an offside or VAR ruled it out, or a 95th minute winner let your accumulator down, take a screenshot off the bet, make sure your bet ID is in it, send it to us on Twitter using the hashtag #PPNearMiss. You can DM us on Instagram either, or send it on WhatsApp 0879 180 180, and we will do the rest. Or Dodgy Goals Commission will decide whether or not you can get your full bet back, or you can get the full payout as well. So we'll have a winner from last week coming up later on the show, but this weekend make sure to screenshot your bet if it is missing out on one or two different places. Let's run through the fixtures for the week then, and we've got Friday night fixtures. We've got Fulham against Wolves tonight at 8 o'clock. That's followed by 12:30 kickoff between Man City and Leeds. Should be a good game. 3 o'clock is Liverpool against Aston Villa, and 5:30 Crystal Palace take on Chelsea. On Sunday we have Burnley against Newcastle, an absolute cracker to kick off the day on Sunday. 2 o'clock West Ham against Leicester. 4:30 is Tottenham against Manchester United. We've got live commentary on that on Off the Ball, Stephen Doyle alongside Vinnie Perth. Sheffield United are taking on Arsenal at 7 o'clock. West Brom against Southampton on Monday at 6, and Brighton versus Everton at 8 o'clock finishes off the weekend's fixtures. Paddy Power specials, we always do this every single week. We give the Paddy Power odds compiler, in this case Emmet, a couple of different bets for the weekend. They boost the odds, and if you're a lucky winner, then you know you're getting the top tips on the show, so you may as well follow them. Chelsea to finish ahead of United at the end of the season. Patrick Bamford to score an assist this weekend against Man City. I think that one's a little bit long. And Newcastle to be in the relegation spots come the last day of the season. There is a bit of logic behind all of these, Emmet, but what are the odds for them?
Yeah, so firstly, I think it's hard to see Newcastle not being in the kind of relegation dogfight towards the end of the season, and we're boosted them to 6-4 to be in the relegation zone the final day of the season. Worth noting that Newcastle's last game is against Fulham, so hopefully we should have some final day drama there. And we're 9-1 about Chelsea to finish above Man United. I guess you're hoping here that United are currently 9 points above Chelsea. But United have shown a bit of kind of Jekyll and Hyde tendencies under Ole Solskjaer, so you're maybe hoping. And as well, United do have the Europa League, so maybe the Thursday-Sunday commitments might kind of hurt their form late in the season. And probably the most attractive one for punters, I'd say, is Patrick Bamford to score an assist against Man City at 33-1. Bamford has only Mo Salah, Son Heung-min, Harry Kane and Bruno Fernandes have more combined goals and assists than Bamford, but he will obviously have a tough job against Man City's excellent defence. Yeah,
he would have been a handy enough player to have in Ireland's international fixtures a couple of weeks ago as well. If you think we're crazy putting Chelsea to finish ahead of United at this stage of the season, remember we did have a bet a couple of months ago with Leicester to finish ahead of Liverpool when Liverpool were currently second, and look how that's ended up. So you never know with the Premier League, especially this sort of topsy-turvy season that we're having. Let's get into the fixtures then. Tonight's fixture, Fulham against Wolves, 8 o'clock kickoff. And this one, Fulham have not been winning games, and they have not been drawing games. They've just been losing games recently. They've been absolutely torrid form. This is the business end of the season, though. They're not that far off, scraping their way out of the relegation zone. Ronan, are you a fan of Friday night kickoffs?
Well, the League of Ireland clashes ordinarily are unfortunate, but I suppose given the circumstances this season where they have to squeeze as many fixtures in as possible, Friday night fixtures are just going to be the norm as it happens. But the Fulham Newcastle dynamic is interesting. It's like a slow bicycle race. I think Newcastle, they're dying to get relegated, and yet Fulham just can't seem to capitalise on it. I know Newcastle have eked out points here and there, but Fulham have had good performances and not turned them into results. And I posed the question last week, would Mitrovic become Fulham's David Healy again, where he did brilliant things internationally and didn't deliver on club form? But he did his end of the bargain last week, getting the goal, and just an utter capitulation from Fulham against a very weakened Aston Villa team. So if they can't be picking up at least a draw in those kinds of games, it's difficult to see them getting out of it. But then on the Wolves side, I think this is a very forgettable season for them, given since Raul Jimenez got injured, it just hasn't really clicked for them. There have been sparks here and there, but given how impressive they've been since the return to the Premier League, this one feels a little bit like a write-off. They have got an easy-ish run in to the end of the season, so they could their end or ultimate position could look favourable enough, but I think on the whole, I think Wolves fans would be glad to see the end of this season.
Yeah, 1 win in 5 for Fulham, but no wins in 5 for Wolves either, so it's going to be a tight enough fixture. I can't imagine it'll be a walkover for Wolves. Emmett, how are the odds falling on this one?
Yeah, so Wolves are 6-4, the draw 19-10, and Wolves 21-10. Just to kind of emphasize, this is obviously a game between two of the kind of lowest scoring teams in the league, and to emphasize that the odds for 0-0 here are 11-2, which is about as short as you'd see in any Premier League game, and it's around the price you'd see probably in an Ireland international. I'd lean towards Wolves at the prices, but I couldn't really recommend a bet here. I think this would be a very tight, low scoring game.
12:30 kickoff on Saturday is an absolute cracker. Man City against Leeds. It should be a cracker, but it tends to be, a little bit lackadaisical when you think there's going to be loads of goals. That's when you actually get no goals. But there should be goals in this game. Man City obviously coming off from a strong win against Leicester last week, followed up by a really good performance against Borussia Dortmund in the Champions League. Leeds beating Sheffield United, scraping by them last week. But Patrick Bamford, 14 goals this year. I don't think anybody was expecting that. And he is boosted for a goal and an assist in this game with our Paddy Power specials. Can Patrick Bamford actually, scrape a win for Leeds against Man City here? Because Man City seem to be cruising, and with the Champions League coming up next week, Ronan, this might be a game that Leeds should look to capitalise on and take a big scalp from the top 6.
Yeah, the Champions League does feel like it's got a hold over Man City at the moment. I know they've made semi-finals in the past, but haven't gotten past the quarter-final stage under Guardiola, and he will be very uber conscious of that coming into what looks like a tricky return tie on paper, given the threat that Dortmund posed them during the week. And they were very impressive against Leicester. I think it probably said more about how much more Leicester have to progress rather than how brilliant City were, but we all saw that stat where I think City had 100% of the ball for a 5-minute spell in that game at Leicester. So City, in terms of their Premier League form, are still clicking. But I think you're right, they will have one eye on that game during the week. But if you look back to the reverse fixture, and there's actually some amazing rematches of games from earlier in the year this weekend, and Leeds City is essentially one of them. I remember Gary Neville waxing lyrical on commentary at Ellen Road that day. It was an unbelievably pacey game for people that remember, just end to end. And City were still kind of finding their feet in this campaign. And I think it was Ruben Diaz's debut, so it just shows like the impact he's had basically since he joined. It's been an upward trajectory for Man City, and I'd expect them to get the result or get a win tomorrow, but I think Leeds only know how to play one way, especially against the big teams, so it promises entertainment. Yeah,
my favourite part from that City game during the week was when Erling Haaland got through and absolutely just pulverised Ruben Diaz off the ball. It just shows you the strength that he has for such a young age. Emmet, for Man City, Ruben Diaz, have you noticed the odds going down for the amount of goals the City are going to concede across the season since he's signed?
100%. I think as well, with the really great centre halves like Virgil van Dijk we saw with Liverpool, I think they can make the players around them better as well. I think we see that we see the best version of Joel Matip or the best version of Joe Gomez when they play alongside Van Dijk, and similarly we're seeing the best football of John Stones' career by far since he played with Diaz. And I think and like City to win to 0 is going off all odds on in most games, but Leeds aren't most teams in terms of being able to kind of to really hurt the top teams. But the bet I liked here was, as we could have talked about in the show before, Leeds have a terrible record conceding goals from set pieces, and whoever starts out of, I think, John Stones or Laporte, I think will be a big threat in the air. both around 10 to 1 to score any time. So I think that looks an attractive bet to me.
Man City were winners in the Champions League during the week. One team that were not winners in the Champions League was Liverpool, because they were absolutely battered by Real Madrid during the weekend. That midfield of Casemiro, Cruz and Modric really controlled the game. It shows you the difference in the standard of quality when you get to that end of the Champions League. They're playing Aston Villa this weekend. It's the 3 o'clock kickoffs on Saturday. Ronan, are you team Gary Neville or team Jamie Carragher when it comes to the Trent Alexander-Arnold argument? Because it seems like Jamie Carragher was wildly wrong, and he was proved massively wrong when it came to that first goal that Real Madrid scored. Ball over the top of Trent's side, and it's a goal.
Yeah, like, it's a difficult one. I was one of the ones castigating Gareth Southgate's handling of the situation and also dropping him from the squad. I think on the whole, Trent Alexander-Arnold's one of the most talented English players, full stop. But it's just unfortunate that it's one of the most stacked positions in world football, that of the English right back, and he's got so much competition for place there. And like, some of them are playing so well. Like, there's a list, the likes of Aaron Wan-Bissaka can't get a full senior cap, given that the likes of Reece James have been playing so well. Kieran Trippier is doing good things for Atletico Madrid when he's on the field. So it's an awkward one for Trent Alexander-Arnold. I think, given how far he can get and the heights he can hit, it's worth persevering with him. But in the immediate term, it's hard to argue with Southgate's logic, actually.
Emmet, we've spoken about the sort of the ups and downs of Manchester United during the season and how the narrative changes week by week. In terms of Liverpool, it seems to be in that stage now as well, when they get a good win last week in the Premier League against Arsenal, then they lose really badly to Real Madrid in the midweek. So are their odds starting to go up and down now as the week progresses as well in terms of their performances?
Yeah, I think on average their odds have certainly kind of, I'd say, have kind of got increased since the kind of middle of the season. I think it's hard to even, especially in these kind of these home games where like they're having awful trouble breaking down the mass defences, like we saw Brighton, Fulham, etc. And I could see this game being kind of somewhat similar, especially given I think Klopp might go for kind of a forward line with the likes of Origi and Shaqiri. And we know, I think Villa's defensive record is outstanding. Under 2.5 goals has won in 7 of Villa's last 9 games. And that would be the way I'd look for a bet here, around 5 to 4.
Yeah, I think Jack Grealish wasn't quite fit enough to play last week, but he should be fit enough to play this week as well. So I'd say
I think he's actually out till May, I think.
Oh, is he? Okay.
So if Grealish was playing, it would definitely, I wouldn't be as keen on the under 2.5 goals.
Yeah, I'd fancy him against Trent at this stage. In the Crystal Palace against Chelsea game, this is obviously a game that Chelsea go in as strong favourites, but last week we had a bet that Chelsea wouldn't lose a game for the rest of the season, and then West Brom go on and absolutely pulverise them in the game, so you never really know. And one thing that Thomas Tuchel and his Chelsea side have struggled with so far this year has been the low block. They really struggle to break down that sort of defence. Timo Werner obviously is someone who relies on getting in behind the defence using his pace. Doesn't have the best shooting ability at this point in time. They've tried a false line with Kai Havertz for this situation as well, and it just seems like Mason Mount is the key man for Chelsea at the minute. He's the only one that seems to just have that little bit of spark when things aren't going their way. And I do think the longer that Crystal Palace can hold on here in this game, the longer that it will look as if they'll get something, and the more likely that they do become. But the problem with Crystal Palace is that if they concede in the first 15 minutes, which they have done quite a few times this year, they have gone on to lose that game really badly. So Crystal Palace aren't in the best form. Chelsea do have the Champions League to look forward to. You know, they did get a 2-0 win, but they still will look to finish off that tie next week. So I think it's actually going to be a low scoring game, just given the fact that, you know, Thomas Tuchel hasn't scored more than 2 goals in his reign for Chelsea so far. So I think low scoring in this, and you should be safe enough. Emmet, would you agree?
I absolutely would. And so the odds here are Palace 6-1, the draw 14-5, and Chelsea 1-2. Last week I was kind of left with an egg on my face. I said that Chelsea to win to nil should be in all weekend ACCAs. They ended up conceding 5 to West Brom. I even got a direct message on Twitter from someone I hadn't heard a long time, who was kind of trolling me basically. But anyway, I'll persist with the same logic. I think even before the West Brom game, they'd only conceded 2 goals in their last 10 matches in the Premier League, and I think the last week was just more of an outlier where Chelsea pushed too hard and pressed out the pitch with 10 men. N'Golo Kante should start here after not starting during the week, and I think he'll shut down any of Palace's counter-attacks. I think Chelsea will kind of grind out a 1 or 2-0 win here.
I don't care what anybody says. There is not a single person on this planet that predicted a 5-2 win for West Brom and Callum Robinson to score those type of goals, and especially the type of goals that West Brom scored as well. There's absolutely not a single football pundit out there that could have seen that coming. It was a phenomenal performance from West Brom. Two teams that are struggling in the lower half of the table, and West Brom might be battling with one of them for relegation this year. It's Burnley against Newcastle. They're the early kick-off on Sunday. Not the best of games to kick off your Sunday afternoon run. There's probably other things that you can be at instead of watching this game, but as you said, Newcastle are just almost trying to get relegated at this point, and their remaining fixtures: West Ham, Liverpool, Leicester, Man City, Arsenal. It's going to be difficult for them, and Burnley are no pushovers, especially at this stage of the season.
Yeah, Burnley just the serial grinders out of points. Do you know what I mean? Like, this looks like a classic Burnley victory on paper, and as you touched on, this is kind of a must-win game for Newcastle, or at least get a positive result, because that daunting list of fixtures coming down the track, it doesn't look too promising. And as we mentioned, that Fulham game at the end of the season looms large. So Newcastle need to pick up points, and Steve Bruce, I think he's probably on borrowed time regardless, but he probably would like to sign off on his Newcastle tenure by keeping them in the league. And I think it'll be more down to, as we said, Fulham's inability to capitalise than Newcastle's blistering end to the season.
I saw the Athletic poll from last week. I referenced it. 26% of the Newcastle fan base would be happy if Steve Bruce continued on next year. I don't really know what Steve Bruce is meant to do. I don't know what any manager is supposed to do with this team, because it is the sort of the business plan for Mike Ashley is just keep them in the Premier League with spending as little money as possible, and that's just not sustainable when other teams around you are spending money. It's just not going to work. Emmet, in terms of Newcastle, I can imagine they've been odds on to lose a game for the last 5-6 weeks going.
Yeah, like I bet against them with Spurs last week, and I was amazed that how much they'll dominate Tottenham. Like, that probably says more about Spurs than Newcastle possibly. This is definitely not the game to be missing your Sunday lunch for here. Just looking at a few of the stats, both these teams are in the top 4 in terms of long balls played, and both of these teams are in the bottom 3 in terms of short passes played. So if old school English football is your thing, this is the game for you. Newcastle,
one thing that I do want to ask you there is, do you do lays? Can you lay against Newcastle instead of?
Yeah, well, you can back Burnley to win or draw a double chance. So that would be you win if it's a draw, or Burnley win.
Yeah, I think that's probably a good option, because Newcastle surprised a couple of people with that draw against Spurs last week. So if you don't fancy Burnley to get the job done, then draw. What was it? Burnley double chance.
Yeah, Burnley win or draw double chance.
Okay, perfect. West Ham against Leicester is the game that follows that, and this is West Ham in the top 4. West Ham under David Moyes in the top 4, and the man that is driving it on is Jesse Lingard, of all people, the Manchester United loanee. His stats so far for West Ham since he signed: 8 appearances, 6 goals, 4 assists. He's working his way back into the England squad here. Ronan, you're a United fan, I'll reveal that. What do you do about Jesse Lingard at the end of the season? Do you take him back?
I don't know. I said last week that it's a good job he's already owned by Man United, or Man United would almost certainly be linked with Jesse Lingard in the £60 million raid or something, because he's got that. He's ticking all the boxes for a Man United transfer target. He's English, and he's playing really well on the counter-attack. So, like, the way West Ham play just suits him down to the ground. And I think he was probably a little bit unfairly treated at Man United towards the back end of that spell, where, like, United weren't playing all that well. Those shots at Solskjaer for not rotating the squad, and Lingard is like a proven international, as much as he's a lampoon in certain quarters. He has delivered for United on the big occasion in the past, so he just probably needed this refresher out at West Ham. And you look at the reverse fixture of this again, West Ham went to the King Power and won 3-0 on the counter-attack, so that was almost like the kernel of the West Ham way this season, where they're really solid at the back and can hit you on the counter. So the unfortunate thing is, as much as Lingard's been a talisman, their 2 other best players probably are Rice and Antonio, and both of them are out for the next 4 to 6 weeks. So, like, as much as you can see them sort of using the momentum and adrenaline to get a result here, their top 4 chances might eke out when when they're missing those key players, you know.
I have a theory that Jesse Lingard has just found his level, and a lot of players can really shine when they drop down just a little bit towards their actual level, and I think that's what's happening with Jesse Lingard. I think he was always a decent enough player. He had a couple of good seasons at United, but he was never going to outshine anybody at United. He was always going to be in the shadow of the likes of Marcus Rashford, Martial, Cavani. All these players are just better players than him. But at a club like West Ham, he can do really well and shine as a player and progress his career at this stage, because, you know, he's no longer a young man, whether the English media like to say is or not. Emmet, in terms of Leicester, one thing that I do want to ask you was, last year we saw a drop off from them at the final few weeks of the season, and obviously they fell out the last week of the season. Man United, Chelsea, Tottenham, they play them in the final 3 games of their season. What are the chances of Leicester falling out again this year? Is it looking like favourable on their side to stay in the top 4 or fall out?
You know, we would be pretty heavily odds on that they will make it. I think one thing, my kind of concern for them was, I think James Maddison's had injury issues, and Harvey Barnes had injury issues as well, and there was kind of too much of a burden on Vardy. But Iheanacho's really stepped up to the plate and kind of taken the burden off Vardy. I think they're really lucky as well. I think if West Ham were at full strength here, I would really favour West Ham. But just on how important Antonio's been to West Ham, Antonio started 19 games this season and they've scored 35 goals in those matches. It's an average of 1.84 goals a game. For a bit of context, only Man United and Man City average more goals per game than that. In the 11 games he hasn't started, they've only 13 goals in 11 matches, which is 1.2 goals per game. And for context there, every team in the top half of the league averages more than 1.2 goals per game. So you're going from like a really top level attack to a mid-table attack without Antonio. So I think Leicester are very fortunate.
Yeah, he's definitely one of the players this season for me. Jose Mourinho takes on his old club Man United later on the Sunday. We have live commentary of that. Vinny Perth will be alongside Stephen Doyle for that. And Spurs are coming off the back of a 2-2 draw with Newcastle. United obviously had their Europa League game against Granada on Thursday night. 2-0 they won that. And Marcus Rashford went off in that game. One thing that I do want to touch on is Marcus Rashford himself. So at 23 years old, he has 261 appearances for the club, and he's just picking up a lot of injuries. He has that ankle injury last season, he had the back injury, and he still continues to play through these games. And I worry that Marcus Rashford is going to end up being like Michael Owen, where he burns really brightly in his career and he just peters off because numerous injuries over the course of the season for being played far too many times. And he has been just playing through multiple injuries under Solskjaer, not rotating him enough. And I don't think United rely on Rashford that much that they need to play him. They've got Cavani on the bench, they've got Tony Martial on the bench, they've got people that can come in and do a job for Marcus Rashford while he's not fully fit. And I just think he's being slogged a bit at United, and we could see a Michael Owen situation. Obviously Michael Owen burned really brightly in his early days, and then obviously that petered out. So I hope it doesn't happen to Marcus Rashford, but I do think that is something that could happen further down the line. In terms of this game, Emmet, what are the odds looking at? Do Tottenham go into this slightly closer favourites than they would do because of United's midweek game?
Yeah, I think probably United would be slightly shorter if they hadn't had the game midweek. So Tottenham are 9-5, the draw 12-5, and United 7-5. Yeah, just to echo your sentiments of Rashford, I saw one of his agency put out on Twitter that he hadn't played without a niggle for 2 years. I think every footballer is playing with some sort of niggle, but 2 years is a long time to be playing with kind of some sort of injury. Spurs let me down last week, and I think they've put in 2 performances in their last 3 games that would suggest they're possibly not far off downing tools from Mourinho. Losing 3-0 to Zagreb was bad enough, but being dominated by a Newcastle team without St. Maximin and Callum Wilson, I think is probably even worse. And even though United are 3 days after the Europa League game, United have an incredible away record, and I think United will be out for revenge after Spurs hammered them 6-1 at Old Trafford earlier in the season. So I like United. United here. Yeah,
I think the frustration with Jose Mourinho is not that he plays this style of football, it's that he plays this style of football against absolutely everybody, including Newcastle, who are in absolutely terrible form. Moving on to Sheffield United against Arsenal. Ronan, we had a bit of a Twitter debate going during the week that the only reason that Arteta is not under more pressure is because he's very good looking. Explain.
Well, you compare him to Ole Gunnar Solskjaer. Seemingly he's been getting pelters since he got the Man United job, whereas Mikel Arteta, he seems to, I see this trust the process stuff, and having come off the back of an uninspiring Unai Emery campaign with Arsenal, Like to be fair, I have seen sparks of improvement in Arsenal, but in the grand scheme of things, you look at the raw data and they're 10th in the table. They were pretty unimpressive in the Europa League last night. Granted, he has put silverware on the table, and that has bought him some time, but it does feel like he's probably getting the benefit of the doubt a little bit more. Probably less to do with his handsomeness and more to do with what you touched on, that he's a disciple of Pep Guardiola, and there's the sense that he's trying to play football the right way. But I'm surprised then that you're taking a hardline stance on an ex-Rangers player. I'm just absolutely shocked with it.
It has absolutely nothing to do with that. It's more down to the fact that, he's just one of these managers that's going to get more time and more media coverage and, favourable coverage. Because I think most of the Arsenal fans that got back to me on that tweet was that they don't think the players are good enough. But, I mean, the players are better now than they were under Unai Emery, and they're worse off the table. So I just don't know where I fall in Arsenal at the minute. I think the signs of improvement, but they're a mid-table side, and that's where you have to look at, is Arteta actually improving Arsenal? And the argument, you could make a strong argument to say no. Emmet, Sheffield United, though, they're bottom of the table. They haven't won a game in how long? And surely to God, Arsenal will come out with a win here.
You'd hope so, yeah. I think so. Sheffield United are 5-1, the draw 14-5, and Arsenal are 4-7. For me, there are two Arsenals. There's the Arsenal with Smith Rowe and Saka, and there's the Arsenal with the older and kind of less willing to press forward line of Aubameyang, Lacazette, and Pepe, as we saw last week. I think against Liverpool, where they were really awful. But kind of an interesting angle here is both teams are in the top three in terms of the worst disciplinary record in the league. So I was looking for kind of a card-based bet here, and John Lundstrom to be carded 11-4 is the way I'm going to go. He's a midfielder for Sheffield United, and I'm not sure if many listeners have seen him play, but he's one of these guys the commentators would say likes a tackle, which, as we know, is a euphemism for he's fairly dirty. So I'm hopeful he can put a late tackle in here and get carded 11-4.
As good as West Brom were last week, I'm not going to focus too hard on West Brom against Southampton, because Southampton are just the most mid-table side in the Premier League right now. West Brom are relegation battlers. So 6 p.m. on Monday is one that you'll probably give a miss and just focus on the 8:15 kickoff between Brighton against Everton. What are the odds in the West Brom Southampton game before we move on, Emmet?
Yeah, so West Brom 5-2, the draw 11-5, and Southampton 23-20. Just quickly, I'm just going to give some to Sam. Big Sam deserves a bit of love here. West Brom are still a 16 shot to stay up even after last week's heroics. But earlier in the season, their stats were quite similar to the Derby team that got the Premier League lowest ever points total, and they're no longer that. In the first 17 games of the league, the season, they lost 8 of their matches by 2 goals or more. They only lost 2 of their last 13 by 2 goals or more, and those came against Spurs and City. And Allardyce won't get much credit if West Brom don't stay up, but I think the job of manager is to get the most out of the resource at your disposal, and I think Allardyce is clearly doing that.
Brighton against Everton, Ronan, 8:15 on Monday. 2 of the flakiest sides in the Premier League, you'd probably argue, this year. So, Graham Potter probably will keep Brighton in the league this year, and Carlo Ancelotti has inevitably improved Everton over the course of the season. They have gotten stronger, they have been less flaky, but again, they are flaky. So these games are ones that you just look to stay away from, really, when it comes to betting.
Yeah, I enjoyed Bayern's Brighton tribute during the week, where I think their expected goals was something like 5, and they still managed to lose the game. So that's something Brighton have been doing on a weekly basis, which is quite impressive. But Everton, no, you're dead right. Flaky is the word, because as much as it felt like when they beat Liverpool at Anfield and all the pomp and ceremony they went with that, and had good results at the likes of Old Trafford as well, it's their home form. Like, they've 4 points from a possible 18, and that's just not good enough in a season where Champions League football was very much a possibility, as has been evidenced by what West Ham have done. Everton, with the talent and investment in that team, probably should have been doing slightly better at home. But I think the arrow's pointing in the right direction. If you're an Everton fan, they seem to be playing some good stuff, have a resiliency that wasn't always there probably under Carlo Ancelotti. It is that sort of annoying 1 or 2 performances a month that you just look at and think, where did that come from? But I think on the whole, when they can rise to the occasion, which is not always something you could say about Everton, and they probably do need to get a win here.
Yeah, I do think Everton will continue to improve under Carlo Ancelotti. Before we finish up then, it's time for the reveal of our winners from last week's Paddy Power Near Miss. So if you don't know what the PP Near Miss is, it's essentially if you have a losing bet, it loses by 1 or 2 different games, or you're let down by a dodgy VAR decision, or whatever happens in the game. If it's dodgy, screenshot it to us, and use the hashtag PPNearMiss on Twitter. You can send us on Instagram, or you can text us on 0879 180 180 is the WhatsApp number for us. So the first winner we're running through is Nicky Daly, and he has his bet up on the screen there. Ipswich, Plymouth, Watford, QPR, Portsmouth, all coming in. And then Norwich, I think that was a late goal as well in the Norwich Preston game that let him down. He had 250 stake. Emmett, what is the crack with this one?
Yeah, so I think this is exactly the kind of bet we're looking for the near miss offer, where you've an excellent accumulator let down in unfortunate circumstances. Norwich, who were kind of riding high at the top of the championship, absolutely dominated that game, missed a load of chances, and then got done in the last minute with a kind of with a deflected goal in the 95th minute. So I think this is a bet we're very happy to pay out on.
And what's he winning?
He's winning €700 here.
Oh wow, 700 from 250. So that's an 11 grand, a 2.5 grand bet, a 700 bet, and this one coming up next is Barry Kent, who is our second winner for the week. And again, it was Norwich let him down, that 95th minute winner. Cambridge United, Wes Houlihan's Cambridge United, Sunderland, Aidan McGiddy, Sunderland, Portsmouth coming through, and then Norwich letting him down. I think there was a young Irish lad playing in that Norwich game as well. I could be wrong in that, but 95th minute winner, or 95th minute goal in the Preston Norwich game let him down. Barry Kent, he had a little bit of a higher stake on that, but what has he won?
Yeah, so I think an ambitious kind of high odds 4-leg accum. Again, very unfortunately being let down by Norwich. But yes, so he's won double what the first person. So it'll be roughly around a 1,400 payout here.
€1,400, nice one. So that's 1,400, 700, 2.5 grand, 11 grand. Why would you not enter the Paddy Power near miss at the end of the week? If you even if it's a lower bet than that, you may as well just screenshot it, send it in to us, and we will see if we can get your bet refunded. That is us done for the Paddy Power half hour this week. Back again every Friday at 1:30. Remember, gamble responsibly, only bet what you can afford, and enjoy the weekend of football.
The Paddy Power half hour on OTB Sports. Minimal contact in stadiums. That shouldn't stop the usual suspects from going down. Gamble responsibly. Gamblingcare.ie.